In this presentation, we'll discuss acrylic painting start to finish. So let's talk about preparing your surface. No matter what you're going to paint on, what you'll need is a surface to paint on, of course, and a cup of water, usually some tape to tape an area down, paper towel for drying brushes, assorted brushes, palette with paint. I'm using black, white primary colors plus some brown. Also some additional space for mixing colors on my palette today. Okay, I'm going to be working on a crocodile's eye. What I want to do is I'm going to plan out a sketch on my painting surface. I usually do a sketch in pencil. And when I'm creating a sketch, especially if I'm looking at a resource or drawing from the top of my head, I'm thinking about the most essential information that I need to put down to get my painting started. So that means I knock out all the structural line work that are going to make my subject specific and stand out. The small details, such as on this animal, like the small crackly textures that you see, is not necessary. I could put it in, but it'll mostly be lost during my initial painting. So again, I want to get the big, basic structure of that. So there we go. Okay, now we're going to do a sketch, but it's going to be a painted one in color, in tone. So I'm going to be taking a look at my whole piece, and there's going to be big basic colors I need to bring in. So I'll grab my palette, and I'm going to think about the skin tone of my crocodile. And it's more of a soft, cool tan color. So I'm going to start making my formula here with a little bit of brown, white, yellow, and then I'm going to put a little touch of blue in there to get a base tone for the crocodile. Once I feel pretty comfortable with the color that I'm there with, I'll make enough to coat an area, and I'm going to work pretty lightly and quickly with it. Usually I'm able to see my pencil lines through this by watering down the paint a little bit. This is specifically called an underpainting. This is the part of the painting you never see in the finished product, but it's there to guide the artist so they can add structure to their painting before they put all the details in. I'll add a little more blue for some more tonal areas and more white or browns to draw out some of the specific details that need to separate themselves to get myself rolling in terms of seeing textures, shadows, light, and a little more structure in the piece. It should be loose, to the point with this. Really give you and define areas a little bit more dramatically at this time. Now what I'll come in is I'm going to fill the eye. Again, it's going to be quick fills of the basic colors I'm going to use in the space. That undertone will really help me later on as I build more layers of color into it. So sometimes you want to think about a underpainting as kind of a quick watercolor of your painting. So that defines my space pretty well. Now let's build up some layers on the paint. Now the first layer I just did, the underpainting, is completely dry at this time. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to enhance my detailed areas, especially the folds of the skin, with some soft line work. And I'll be coming back in and putting in shadows and highlights throughout in a little bit. I suggest after doing an underpainting of your whole painting, come back and start working in a section at a time to start to build those areas. I'm using kind of a combination of blues and browns to create a cool gray shadow. And again, I'm enhancing my form by creating some additional contrast. I'll go a little closer. I'm going to start doing some more finish work on my eye. With a little combination of white and red, I'm going to create a soft pink inner glow in the cornea. And then I'm going to come from the outer edges of the eye, add a little bit more red and oranges. Almost stipple it in to create some subtle textures and soft transitions from a more intense color to a lighter color. When you're working with paint, wet against wet paint, it blends quite easily. You just have to work with how much pressure you use with the brush to sensitively allow the colors to merge and blend together. As you'll see, I'm going to be enhancing and darkening the details inside the eye as we go through this section. Coming back in, I'll be adding some soft, warm reds that fade into the dark values there. Even using my finger to soften some of the muddy texture there a little bit. Coming in with some straight white to identify some highlighted edges and also reflective edges from light on the eyes. Here I'm using it like a pen or a marker. What I can do is clean the brush and then muddy and soften down the white a little bit so it gets a little grayer and goes into shadow a little more. I'll just enhance some other areas with some darks and lights. So the inner eye is in pretty good shape. As I move forward now, I'm going to continue on to the skin. I'm going to refresh the area with some really dark shadows with a combination of browns and blues here. And we'll get moving in the direction of adding our midtones of the skin, our shadows, and our highlights, and allowing some soft blending in between the two. So you want to actively paint your midtones and your shadows together while the paint's still wet. So I'm mixing up a batch of like the mid-tone, skin tone, because when that works into the dark shadows I put in, the colors actually blend and you can create more believable forms of tonal change or value change from light to dark. I'll exclusively be working on finishing the center of the painting, while I'll leave in more of the areas of the border of the painting for a later video. Now I'm coming in with some white and some of the skin tone left over. I'm going to add some of the highlighted areas. They go in and around right near where the shadows are. After I do that, I'll clean my brush. So have a clean, dry brush to right there to soften the white into the areas gradually. Now let's add some details. I'm going to take a thin round brush and I'm going to work on some of the details of the scales now. So I'm going to create a thin dark color, a dark brown, and I'm going to work on drawing the scale pattern. So much like you would use a color pencil, at this point I'm going to map out the pattern for this animal. Sometimes you'll be doing feathers on an animal or brickwork on a building and whatnot, and you have to draw a little bit more, or on clothing, some line work. So the line work here is really going to suggest the effect of the scale reptilius-like texture. It's important to point out that if I were to do this earlier on, this information that I'm putting in would get completely in the way and completely overwhelmed by trying to shade the skin tones. So this is the appropriate time to add these type of details. Prior to this, they would just be in the way of me trying to do my painting, which would make it very difficult to create a more distinguished look on the animal. Now that we have all the values and the shadows behind it, drawing this pattern becomes much more believable, much more effective. And who wants to do the same thing over and over and over again in a painting? Now I'm just coming back. I'm going to search for additional details such as defining edges, adding more highlights, adding more shadows. So you'll see me coming in with some thin coats of white or darker tones on the animal surface to build up some of these details. Pay attention to drying time. Acrylic paint, the thinner you use it and the lighter you touch with it, the quicker it dries. It can take as little as 4 or 5 minutes for an area to dry, or it can take as long as an hour, depending on how thick you add the paint. It's one of the advantages of acrylic paint. It can dry pretty quickly, so you can work layers very quickly. But it's also one of the issues where you have to work quickly sometimes to get what you want. So as you can see, I'm focusing primarily on the center of the painting, where the eye and the eye socket area is, while the other areas are going to be worked on at a later point. Finally, there is a glared highlight on the eye, so I'm going to start pretty thinly with a little bit of white in a lot of water to create a transparent look, and then I'm going to come in with some of the warmer tones and whites to build this highlighted reflection on the lens of the eye. Has to look semi-transparent so it's believable and feels more like glass than anything else. A simple shape of white might work for a cartoon character, but it won't work very well for something more realistic. Okay, everyone, take it one step at a time. Enjoy your painting.